It's a surreal sight. This Black Hawk moved in just in the last few minutes from the Border Patrol, landing at that Homeland Security office on the Paramount side, right next to the Home Depot, and they are unloading this huge helicopter with, just boxes and boxes, dozens of boxes of ammunitions, less lethal weaponry. You see these tanks with flammable labels on the side, one after another, an entire shipment, as if they were getting ready for some kind of a major battle. It really has to be said, this is a remarkable sight in the middle of a suburban street here, where they are just unloading all of these weapons, carts full of boxes and flammable weaponry. So you can see that it just made its own parking spot there in the parking lot of that Homeland Security office on the other side of the river, where all of this is taking place, and just a few blocks from that Home Depot and right across the freeway from where that car fire was, just a few blocks away, and the protesters and Sheriff's Department had been squaring off. But this site here at the Homeland Security office of these federal officials unloading dozens of boxes of weapons and ammunition is just quite a sight to behold here. Something I really don't recall ever seeing here. Guys, back to you.
Look, we're going to continue doing our job. And yesterday we got 118 arrests. I was out here yesterday to kick off this operation. And what people aren't talking about is ICE served several warrants yesterday. These were criminal warrants. This is a criminal investigation. And today we're continuing operations. They're not going to shut us down. We're out there right now doing operations. We're going to keep doing operations. We brought in more resources to push back the protesters, but I'll say it again, a serious warning. You can protest all you want. You got your First Amendment rights. But if you cross that line of impediment, or you're putting hands on officers or destroy property, you will be prosecuted. There's zero tolerance on crossing that lines, and that's what we're standing by. We're bringing more resources as we speak. We'll have more resources tonight. We're going to continue doing the job that American people voted Donald Trump in office to do, and we're not going to apologize for doing it.
Now to that breaking news with more ICE protests happening in Lower Manhattan, this time after an 11th grader was taken into custody by ICE agents when he shows up to an asylum hearing. He's at least the second New York City public school student detained since the start of the Trump administration. Fox 5's Stephanie Bertini live in Foley Square tonight with the latest. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, Richard, I'm going to zoom into the area now. Our photojournalist pushing in. You can see now it's pretty clear out here. Just a short time ago, police and protesters were clashing right here. The NYPD confirms several people have been taken into custody. We shot video as demonstrations here at Federal Plaza got out of control.
Steve, what's the situation like right now? We do understand the National Guard has now been put into place.
Yeah, National Guard is on the ground. Images are unmistakable. Of course, the armored vehicles, the sort of desert camo. You start to see them sort of set up in the area that we believe is kind of that federal complex downtown where a lot of the detentions for these sweeping ICE raids have been taking place.
This has grave danger for the people of that area.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, Robert, because the California governor, Gavin Newsom, posted on X saying the federal government is taking over the California National Guard, and that'll only escalate tensions. But can the federal government and the president take over a state's National Guard under Title 10? And what exactly, briefly, is Title 10?
Title 10 simply governs the status of National Guard troops. So when the president takes over the National Guard unit, he is elevating those troops from being state-level National Guard to being federally activated, and therefore the federal government pays them. They're under the command of the federal government. Now that's usually used for overseas deployment. If you're going to take troops from California and deploy them to the Middle East, for example, you'll do that under Title 10. He would have to raise up to using the Insurrection Act of 1807 as an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1876 in order to use those federal troops in a law enforcement function. And that is something which is so rare in American history. And if we're saying that this is what's going to happen if you protest against the Trump administration, then truly we are losing our democratic values. That is what you will see in almost any autocratic country, the use of federal law enforcement against the local will in order to put down speech.
At least 45 people were arrested last night, while DHS says that more than 118 illegals were apprehended this week. The protester tried to storm into an ICE facility last night after being fired upon by radical speakers at a rally. Listen.
Free them all! Free them all! Free them all! Because an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us! And Los Angeles does not back down for that kind of fight.
continue fighting until we reconstruct every single institution from the ground up so that we can grant full amnesty for all immigrants. Demand full compensation for all of the victims of this criminal injustice system.
What's going to change this is organizing, and not just any type of organizing, militant organizing.
Incredibly, Mayor Karen Bass is still standing with the protesters, saying she's fighting for all Angelenos regardless of immigration status, and doubling down that LA is a city of migrants, leaving out the illegal part. But the people on the side, as Karen Bass, are threatening ICE agents, spray painting death to ICE on dumpsters. Gavin Newsom also weighing in on the riots and blamed them on, get this, President Trump, accusing him of tearing families apart. And this chaos has now spread to New York City today alone as protesters organized in Lower Manhattan.
You know, this all started with Donald Trump saying he was going after criminals. What I've heard today that he went after kids, parents when they were attending their kids' graduations, people that were working in the fashion district, people that showed up, people who had asylum, received asylum, were going through the process, showed up to court like they've done over and over, and were taken to the basement and arrested. So right now they're doing more to spread fear, and that is, and they're not keeping everybody safe. You know, they're trying to say that they're keeping us safe by arresting a seamstress in the fashion district.
We reached out to the LAPD this morning about what went down. They say officers went in and dispersed the crowd. They say no one was arrested in Chinatown.
Yeah, we've already seen a large growing National Guard presence here in downtown LA. If you take a look behind me here, you can see troops are stationed along Alameda Street as another protest is expected to take place later today near City Hall. This follows President Trump's deployment of 2,000 National Guard members in response to a series of immigration protests across the city. This is new video from overnight showing the troops arrive. They stopped at City Hall after driving through Paramount, then ended up here at the Federal Building. Meantime, this follows another night of protest. Video from last night shows tense moments in downtown LA as protesters clashed with police, some setting off fireworks and starting fires. Officers responded with what appeared to be tear gas to disperse the crowds. In a separate incident, demonstrators were seen entering a damaged convenience store in Compton and looting items from inside. According to the LAPD, multiple individuals who returned to the area after a dispersal order was issued on Alameda Street were detained and are expected to be booked for failure to disperse. We spoke with Mayor Bass about the deployment of the National Guard and believes it's not necessary.
My concern, and we have experienced civil unrest, and I remember 1992 very well, that one of the worst things you can do is have an extreme presence of law enforcement that gets everybody agitated and the violence actually escalates.
Trump says he's deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to Los Angeles. I mean, how significant is this legally, and what federal laws or articles does Trump need to abide by to deploy the National Guard?
This is absolutely unprecedented, nearly in American history. The last time I can think of this happening is 1958, when President Eisenhower deployed federal troops to Arkansas to integrate schools, and they had to call the National Guard to protect students like Ruby Bridges and Mary Bill Petillo to integrate schools. That is how rarely these laws are used. But under the Posse Comitatus Act of 1876, federal troops are banned from law enforcement functions inside of states. This is a result of the end of Reconstruction and the negotiations around the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, which resulted in the withdrawal of federal troops from the South after the Civil War. An exception to the Posse Comitatus Act is the Insurrection Act of 1807, which President Eisenhower used in 58, and which President Trump would have to use right now to take the National Guard troops that he is calling up under Title 10 and allow them to actually perform these law enforcement functions.
So who has the ultimate authority then to deploy the National Guard, and how would the Insurrection Act play into this current situation, if at all? And are we likely to see legal challenges then against the deployment, Robert?
There will absolutely be legal challenges. Normally, if federal troops are going to be used inside of states, it's going to be at the invitation of the governor of that state. For example, in 1992, California governor invited federal troops in to put down the LA riots. But if the governor, such as Gavin Newsom, has not asked for federal troops to come in, and these troops are coming in against his will, then there will be challenges and more than likely a judicial stay by the appeals court, and this will have to go to the Supreme Court in order to determine who has the legal right to deploy those troops if any law enforcement function. Not to mention the fact that soldiers are not cops, and that's why you do not use them as a law enforcement. This has grave danger for the people of that area.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, Robert.
So to have another peacekeeping element, so to speak, 2,000 National Guard troops on the ground, I can't imagine it's going to do much more than elevate the tension, which is already extremely high. We're hearing that there is going to be another planned rally today at that federal complex. There will be, if not dozens, if not hundreds, if not maybe even thousands of protesters back on the street again. And at that point, we should see the first action taken by the National Guard, now federalized and in town.